So I'm really freaked out right now. A little background. I'm in my late 30s and I live at home with my brother and fiance. I always feel really safe because my brother's at home at nights and he is armed to the teeth. We have a pit bull who is very protective of us. So my brother recently took a temporary high clearance security job in Arizona, so he's being put up in a hotel out there. Before he left, he showed my fiance Rob and I how to operate one of his guns just in case. We live in one of the safest towns in America. Nothing bad hardly happens. It's like Mayberry. But with all of this recent clown BS and the increase of drugs, it's better to be safe than sorry. So this begins 2 nights ago. My fiance goes to bed early because he has to be up by 5 a.m. So we are in bed, me, him, and the dog. I have my headphones on and I'm watching something on my tablet. Just FYI, I snore bad, so my poor fiance wears earplugs. Around 11:30, my dog jolts out of a sound sleep and starts growling. She goes over to the window in our bedroom and starts growling louder, so I get up to check. I look outside and there's a man staring at me. He's skinny and old, grizzly grayed hair, unkempt beard, vacant eyes. He looks at me and smiles and I about lost it. Now my dog is straight up foaming at the mouth and barking. This finally wakes up my fiance and he comes over to see what was going on. The man sees I'm not alone and takes off. We call the cops. They show up and start looking around. They find the guy's backpack. He has a notebook with my name and my address and a diagram of my freaking house. They find beef jerky, sleeping pills, scissors, twine, electrical tape, condoms, and a rusted knife. They told me they will be on the lookout for him, but I'm entirely freaked out. So, old man, let's never meet again. Update. They caught him. Not before he tried it again, though. Today I was home alone. My fiance was working. My dog was in my room, and I had all the doors locked, including the bedroom door. I drifted off for a nap when I hear someone banging on the window. Dog's going crazy. I don't hesitate. I call 911, and the officer comes right over. Operator tells me he caught him running out of my gate, so I hang on the phone with her. They catch him and I guess put him in the car. Turns out, the dude was someone I worked with years ago. He had been in my house 10 years prior during a work barbecue I hosted. He swore to the officers he didn't mean any harm, but I beg to differ. But this explains how he knew the outline of my home. Also, 10 years ago, I had another dog. She was a lab mix and not the world's greatest guard dog. I'm guessing maybe he thought I still had her. Anyway, he's in jail and supposedly he's got tons of warrants for breaking, entering, and loitering, to name a few. So this is one of my less scary experiences with creepy or possibly deranged people in my life. But not to say it still doesn't creep me out. As a kid, I liked to sit on my little mini playground, as I called it, and read. I actually look back on this and laugh, as now I'm a lot more isolated and an indoor person. My dad got home around 6, so my mom took us to and from school. When my mom was outside parking her car, she pointed out a creepy guy in a car in front of ours, just looking at us. She ushered us inside and brushed it up to just a weird coincidence or something like that. She still kept a close eye on me from the kitchen window, but she had to do something and left the kitchen. Now, my mom was cautious because she said she had a creepy experience with a pedophile herself. From the top of the platform I was on, next to the slide, I heard a man say something. I don't remember what it was, but it was something along the lines of,
"Hey kiddo, I have some Goosebump books in my car if you want to go read them with me."
My mom and dad had drilled stranger danger into my head, and I was a really smart kid for my age, so I tried to tell the guy off myself. I know, stupid decision, but I thought I could handle it. I was wrong. The guy kept insisting that I come and read with him, and I kept saying no. Eventually, the guy pretended to get a phone call and claim it was from my mom. He told me she said to get into his car and he'll take me to the bookstore. I knew that there was no reason for her to ask someone to take me somewhere, and I just ignored him. Then he got out of his car and began approaching me. This was before we got a fence, so I was out in the open. He grabbed my arm and dragged me into his car, but just then, as if God himself gave a miracle, a police car came down the road and saw what was going on. The guy let me go and sped off. The officer chased him and eventually caught him. My mom come rushing out when she heard the sirens and comforted me. The guy claimed to be my dad and that my mom was abusing me. The officer knew my family well and called his bluff. I'm seriously glad that the officer was there just then. I can't explain it in any other way than a miracle. So, pedophile who tried to abduct me, let's not meet again. Back when life was simpler, but bad things still happen, John Benet Ramsey being murdered, and at this point in time, Elizabeth Smart was just taken out of her home. I myself had a very scared notion about being in my room alone. I had slept with my parents from the time I was born until now, which at this time, I was about 12. I finally decided that I need to sleep in my own room, though, again, very freaked out about getting kidnapped. The only child, parents being overprotective, and letting me watch the news to keep informed about the world. Anyways, I was so terrified about the things I had seen that I didn't even undress in my room. This was the first night that I actually decided to do this. My room was situated on the first floor with the living room a wall between us. This was where my parents were. I had bunk beds, a top bunk for my crap, and a bottom bunk for me to sleep. So because of the shadow that cast from the top bunk, I could see out the window better than if there was no bunk. I had left the window and the shade open and up to let the cool night air in. I think my mom was in the bathroom, which precipitated me getting dressed in my room. Otherwise, this may have never happened, or worse. So I go and take off my shirt, and that's when I hear branches crackling. I immediately look out the window and I see a black silhouette of a face. I can't see any features. This face is looking at me and I'm looking back. I scream bloody murder. My dad rushes in, but before he can see anything himself, this man, or being, slowly turns to the left and walks. Not run, walks away. My dad tried to tell me I'm making it up.
Everything is fine.
He closes the window and pulls the shades down and goes about the rest of the night. In the morning, I make my own investigation. I go out to where the window was, look up at the window, and guesstimate that he must have been over 6 foot tall to look into my room like that. My dad is only 5'11" and can't look into my room at all. I tell my dad this, but he just shrugs it off. Fast forward to about 13 years later, I'm sitting in my dad's apartment with my boyfriend talking about this ordeal. My dad adds to the story.
Oh, Kate, I remember that night. I ran out of the front door to see if I could see anything, and I saw a man walking up the street dressed in all black. I slept on the couch with a knife in case he came back. Dude was really tall, and when I yelled at him, he kept walking. You're fine and alive. Don't worry about it anymore.
So yeah, Dad in his infinite wisdom keeping that from me. Really tall guy, let's not meet again. First thing I'm going to say is that this is totally real, and I was freaked out of my wits for days. I don't think I could have made some of this stuff up. Everyone I tell it to says it is terrifying, and after reading through some of the stories on this sub, I think it would be a great fit. It was February of 2014. This thing I was doing at work kind of came to a head all at once, and I was basically going to have to spend the entire weekend writing a press release that was needed the following Monday by 10 a.m. Now, my grandparents owned some property way out in the boonies of East Texas. I grew up going out there all the time for family get-togethers and whatnot. Now, since it was only a 45-minute drive away from where I lived, I would go out there with my friends to camp, party, whatever. Well, I knew I was going to be writing all weekend. I thought, why not spend it in the great outdoors instead of holed up in my apartment in Houston? I had never stayed out there by myself, but had always been keen on the idea and thought this would be an excellent time to do it. I called my granddad asking if it would be okay for me to use the place for the weekend, and he said,
"Of course."
He did seem a little reluctant about me doing it alone, but I was just a 24-year-old guy who'd grown up hiking and felt totally competent to handle anything that might happen. Honestly, at that time, I was a little insulted when he seemed to think me going out there by myself was not the best idea. He made sure I knew how to turn on the electricity and water, which of course I did. I had only done it 1,000,000 times when I brought my friends. He asked if I had a key, which, again, of course, I did. Finally, he said,
"You know where I keep the Henry, right?"
My granddad is kind of a cowboy and keeps a big 30-30 Henry repeater out there mainly for shooting whitetail, but you never know. Yeah, I said, admittedly for the first time nervous since, to my knowledge, he was the only one who had ever stayed out there by himself, and he had never really talked to me about his guns. The drive out there was nice after I got out of the city. I left work at 4:30, already packed, and drove straight there. With traffic, freaking Houston, I made it out there by about 6:45. Still light, but it was beginning to turn to dusk. I took my duffel bag out of the trunk and went inside. The house is more like a small resort than a ranch house. It's really nice, which is why I enjoy taking people out there so much. It has 12 bedrooms, and I choose the upstairs sort of master bedroom, if you could call it that. I unpacked, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop to look at what I had to write, and immediately closed it.
"Screw that,"
I thought.
"I'll work on that tomorrow. Now I want to take a walk."
There's a trail that goes in a big circle around the perimeter of the property, and is about 3.5 miles. It was dark out now, and the thought briefly crossed my mind to bring my granddad's gun, but I decided on a sturdy 5-foot wooden dowel instead, so I could have a walking stick and I wouldn't slip in the dark and shoot my foot off or something. I put on a hoodie, grabbed a flashlight, and started off. It was a clear moonless night, and the swath of the Milky Way across the sky was impressive. But it was still really dark out. I didn't use my flashlight, so my eyes would adjust, and after 10 or so minutes, I could see reasonably well. It was nice. Chilly, but nice. After about 1.5 miles, I decided to cut the route short through the woods and head back. I know the land so well that I could easily get back to the house from any point on the property. The woods and brush were pretty dense, though, and I'm forced to turn on the flashlight. A thick wall of twigs and vines are revealed. I push through it with my stick, getting a couple of scratches when I see something deeper in the woods, partially obscured by the underbrush. It looks like something left a pile of clothes in the woods. I kept the light trained on it for a second or two, trying to see what it is. Suddenly, it jumps up really fast and sprints away further into the forest. My heart is in my throat, and my stomach does a somersault. I feel the pins and needles of an adrenaline surge all over. With all the force I can muster, I try to shout, "Who is that?" But I have no idea what it actually sounded like. Immediately, I regret not having that rifle, but hell, I even left my cell phone on the bed. The worst part of it is, whoever that guy was took off in the direction of the house, and I can't remember if I locked the door. Now that the initial shock begins to wear off, a real fear begins. It is suddenly very cold. Never before have I felt so isolated and so freaking stupid. I should have never come out here totally by myself. If that guy shoots me or something, nobody will even miss me until Monday.
Okay, get a hold of yourself. You need to get your phone.
I walk a mile through the woods, freaking terrified. The woods end about 150 yards from the house's front patio, and I basically sprint it. Now, for any of you who have been in this situation, know that running does not help. You feel that gut-wrenching panic getting a hold, and constantly think something is right at your heels. When I get to the front door in this semi-sane state, I am in for another shock since the door is cracked open and I can't remember if I did it or not. I have to go inside. I push the door open, holding the dowel sort of like a baseball bat, and immediately hear shrieking coming from the living room. I don't think that I've ever been as close to blind terror as I was in that moment. I would not have been able to speak. A strangled
Gah!
escaped my throat and I was hardly aware of it. I sprint up the stairs and into the room where my stuff is. At every turn, expected to see some horrific rotted corpse shrieking at me. I slam the door behind me and hear the scream again, from directly below me this time. I run into the bathroom and dial 911, locking the door and hiding in the shower. In retrospect, this seems like a really bitchy thing to do, but every ounce of bravado I had was long since drained. I tried to describe what was happening on the phone, but I'm not sure how much of it made sense. There was a little town about 9 miles away from our property, and that was where the nearest police station was. It took them 20 minutes to arrive, during which I heard the screams one more time. It was lower pitched now and sounded strangled. Then came the freaking godsend of flashing red and blue lights through the window. I was still in the shower when I heard a man shout,
Police! Anyone here? Come out!
I got up and opened the door, and I hear a voice downstairs.
Christ, Evans, call an ambulance.
I open the bedroom door, and a cop down the hall has a gun on me saying,
Freeze!
I try to explain that this is my family's place, and I am the caller, but they still handcuffed me. I soon see why. In the living room is the man I saw in the woods on his back staring blankly upward, one arm outstretched at the ceiling, and the other bent, but still reaching upward. His head was lying in a pool of blood. We eventually get it cleared up who is who, and that I didn't crack that guy over the head. Later, I found out this guy was a paranoid schizophrenic, probably homeless man who had wandered onto our property. Hard to tell from where. We still don't know why he was bleeding. Blunt force trauma of some sort. Maybe a fall? So insane, dude. He basically gave me like 3 heart attacks. So let's not meet. The summer before I left for college, I had fallen asleep at my friend's house and woke up sometime around midnight and drove home. I am from a fairly small town in the south, and my parents lived well outside of the city limits, down a gravel road. We had no neighbors close enough to see, which was nice most of the time. As I pull into the circled driveway, my headlights shine across the front of the house. That's when I noticed a man crouching behind the shrub outside of my parents' bedroom window. I stopped the car and put the bright lights on. He stayed put, so I just kept flashing my lights at him. Finally, he stood up and took off running into a field that ran adjacent to our property. It still creeps me out to think what may have happened if I hadn't shown up when I did. Deeper in the woods, partially of when I see something, deeper in the woods, partially.